So, Pope Leo XIV just released his first encyclical, Magnifica, Humanitas. And, of course, it's over 43,000 words, and I have not had the chance to read it. It's 1 o'clock in the morning here. But knowing that it was coming out, I was waiting for it to show up. And I did look through the notes at the end, and I came across something quite interesting. He quotes from a very famous J.R.R. Tolkien. Now, this comes in paragraph 213 of the encyclical, but for some context here, I'd like to read paragraph 212, go to the portion of the Return of the King that he's quoting from, give some context there, and I have some thoughts. Hopefully this won't be too rambling. So in paragraph 212, he says, "At this point, however, a subtle temptation may emerge, namely the thought that the problems are too big and we are too small, and that our choices, therefore, cannot make a difference. This is a polite form of resignation, often disguised as realism. Certainly, not everyone has the same power to make a difference. There are those who govern, make investment decisions, lead institutions, conduct research, educate, produce or provide information, and then there are those who only seem to live their daily lives. Yet, no one is without responsibility. We all have our own areas for action, and it is precisely there and nowhere else that we must choose whether to fuel the mentality of force, even if only through indifference, cynicism, lies, or hatred, or to preserve the mindset of peace with truth, moderation, closeness, and care." Then he goes on to say that a 20th century Catholic author by the name of Tolkien puts in the words of one of his protagonists, which is Gandalf. And this is in book 5, so in The Return of the King, chapter 10, which that chapter is entitled The Last Debate. And I can't help but feel that the name of the chapter and the context from which this quote comes from is playing into the mindset of this debate over AI. Is this the last debate? But so this is at a point where Aragorn is encamped outside of Gondor, and they're holding a council in the tents. There's Prince Imrahil, Eomer, Aragorn, Gandalf. And Gandalf says, this is not the quote from the encyclical, but this is context. He says, "My lords, listen to the words of the steward of Gondor before he died. You may triumph on the fields of Pelennor for a day, but against the power that has now arisen, there is no victory. I do not bid you despair as he did, but to ponder the truth in these words. The stones of seeing do not lie, and not even the Lord of Barad-dûr can make them do so. He can, maybe, by his will choose what things shall be seen by weaker minds, or cause them to mistake the meaning of what they see. Nonetheless, it cannot be doubted that when Denethor saw great forces arrayed against him in Mordor, and more still being gathered, he saw that which truly is. Hardly has our strength sufficed to beat off the first great assault. The next will be greater. This war then is without final hope, as Denethor perceived. Victory cannot be achieved by arms, whether you sit here to endure siege after siege or march out to be overwhelmed beyond the river. You have only a choice of evils, and prudence would counsel you to strengthen such strong places as you have, and there await the onset, for so shall the time before your end be made a little longer. Then you would have us retreat to Minas Tirith or Dol Amroth, or to Dunharrow, and there sit like children on sandcastles when the tide is flowing, said Imrahil. That would be no new counsel, said Gandalf. Have you not done this and little more in all the days of Denethor? But no, I said this would be prudent. I do not counsel prudence. I said victory could not be achieved by arms. I still hope for victory, but not by arms. For into the midst of all these policies comes the ring of power, the foundation of Barad-dûr, and the hope of Sauron. Concerning this thing, my lords, you now all know enough for the understanding of our plight and of Sauron's. If he regains it, your valor is vain, and his victory will be swift and complete. So complete that none can foresee the end of it while this world lasts. If it is destroyed, then he will fall, and his fall will be so low that none can foresee his arising ever again. For he will lose the best part of the strength that was native to him in his beginning, and all that was made or begun with that power will crumble, and he will be maimed forever, becoming a mere spirit of malice that gnaws itself in the shadows, but cannot again grow or take shape. And so a great evil of this world will be removed. Other evils there are that may come, for Sauron is himself but a servant or emissary, and this is what Pope Leo quotes in his encyclical here. Yet it is not our part to master all the tides of the world, but to do what is in us for the succor of those years wherein we are set, uprooting the evil in the fields that we know, so that those who live after may have clean earth to till. And that's the end of the quote from Pope Leo. What weather they shall have is not ours to rule. So Pope Leo goes on after quoting that from Gandalf, and he says, the civilization of love will not arise from a singular or spectacular gesture, but from the sum total of small, steadfast acts of fidelity that serve as a bulwark against dehumanization. For this reason, it is worthwhile pausing to reflect on some aspects of how we, each in our own way, can cooperate in building the civilization of love. Without presuming to exhaust this theme, I would like to propose 5 paths toward daily and public responsibility. The need to disarm words, building peace through justice, adopting the perspective of victims, cultivating a healthy realism, and reviving dialogue and multilateralism. Now, apart from my shock at the encyclical including a quotation from Tolkien, it seems to me that there's much food for thought in just these 2 paragraphs, which, as I said, I'm looking forward to reading the whole thing, but it's a hefty document. And in the coming days, I'm sure you'll see every single Catholic YouTuber and blogger and theologians and bishops and Protestant commentators, even, and Orthodox commentators, maybe even some of the big tech guys. You might see politicians all commenting on a document that maybe they've read all the way through it, but have they prayerfully read all the way through it? Have they reflected on every line of this infallible document that's added to the magisterium of the church? I highly doubt it. I don't believe that people have done that with the last pontiff's documents. Not even his first major document of Evangelii Gaudium, which is considered by Pope Francis and by Pope Leo and by commentators on it as a blueprint for the church moving forward and for our understanding of how the church is moving forward in the synodal way. And obviously, we see many people misunderstanding what that means. And I really do believe that it comes from a lack of reflective meditation on the words that are being put out by our Holy Father, or by the last Holy Father, or by St. Pope John Paul II. So many who would claim to be St. Pope John Paul II Catholics. But did they truly understand him? St. John the 23rd? Did we read Pacem in Terras, and has the world been changed by what we read? Now, I would caution everybody not to be hasty, not to move too quickly. This is what this world right now does to us. It's the frenetic pace of our modern culture, as Pope Francis would call it. Everything happens so quickly. News that was put out 3 minutes ago is old news. We're always waiting for the next thing. And a couple of things, again, I didn't want this to be rambling, but it of course has turned into a ramble. But maybe that has to do with the fact that I refuse to write scripts for videos that I do. And it's always off the cuff. But in paragraph 212, the paragraph before he quotes Tolkien, he says a few things that make me think of personal stories. He says that maybe it feels like the temptation may emerge that we look at the problems as too big and we're too small. And we can't make a difference. A polite form of resignation disguised as realism, he calls it. And in my own conversations with people in my family or friends, I'm often told that's just the way the world is. Why are you complaining? Why are you bemoaning these things? And I'll tell you why. Because I don't have resignation disguised as realism. I look to humanity's telos, and I look to the kingdom and I say, we can be so much more. Our cities can be more beautiful. Our people can be kinder. Our governments can be more just. We could live in a world where swords are finally beat into plowshares. And why don't we? Resignation disguised as realism, complacency, contentment with the status quo. I'm pretty much always reading Thomas Merton, And he talks about this a lot. The status quo of things. And are we not caught up in a simulacrum of reality? And he was a lover of Saint Therese of Lisieux, the little flower. And that was another thing that this paragraph reminded me of. No one is without responsibility. We all have our own areas for action. We must choose whether to feel the mentality of force or to preserve the mindset of peace. And it's in the little things. It's doing the next right thing. It's being the change that you want to see in the world. Disarming our words. That doesn't mean just what we put out into the public. It means how we interact with our family. And I'm the first to say that I am guilty of murder. If you call your brother fool, you have already committed murder in your heart. To disarm our words, even in our own households. I thought of another story that I heard from one of the youth pastors at my old Protestant church. When he spoke of the problems being too big and us being too small. There's a story of a young girl who's walking along the beach. And she's looking for starfish that have washed up on the shore. And then whenever she finds one, she picks it up and tosses it back into the ocean. And this wiser, older man comes along. Somebody who's been jaded by life. And he says, "What are you doing? You're never going to get them all. You're never going to make a difference. What do you think you're going to accomplish? You're not making any difference." And the little girl, with all the true wisdom of a child, I made a difference to that one. And I think of the man that I saw on YouTube the other day who holds the world record for planting the most trees. Or I think of all the litter that I've ever picked up. Am I gonna make the world clean by my walking around the neighborhood and picking up a piece of litter? No. But I made a difference. You can make a difference in whatever little thing that we do that promotes love and peace and justice. A civilization of love will not arise from a singular or spectacular gesture, but from the sum total of small, steadfast acts of fidelity that serve as a bulwark against dehumanization. Just to go and be outside, feel the wind on your face, feel the grass against your feet, admire the beauty of a woman. It reminds us of our humanity. And each time we do one of those things, that all the others will say, "What is that even doing?" We're adding to that sum total of steadfast acts of fidelity that serve as a bulwark against dehumanization. Each in our own way can cooperate in building the civilization of love, and that's what we're called to. Whether it be as a priest, as a monk, as a father, as a wife, as a consecrated virgin, as an artist, a musician, bringing beauty to the world. We could reflect forever on just these 2 paragraphs. And here is the deluge coming over the next couple of days of people saying that they understand the whole 43,000 words, giving their interpretation, telling us what it means. To think of another, one of my favorite sections in all of the Lord of the Rings, and the movies bastardized it, is when Frodo and Sam come into contact with Faramir. And of course, you know in the movies that he thinks he's going to take them back to Gondor. But this really did Faramir dirty. Because in the books, he gives one of the most beautiful monologues of all time. And he says, even if I found this thing on the side of the road, I would not take it up. Speaking of the ring. And it makes sense there to say that Pope Leo ends Magnifica Humanitas with the Magnificat. The woman that would never take up that ring of power, even if it were lying on the side of the road. Our Lady of Peace and Unity, pray for us.